What happens when a government insider refuses to back down, even when a federal judge demands answers? In a moment that shocked the courtroom and left the nation talking, Kash Patel stood his ground. But when he held up a single sheet of paper, everything changed. The name on that declassified memo would spark a political earthquake. Narrative. The courtroom was filled with an uncomfortable tension. Journalists whispered from the gallery, lawyers shuffled papers, and federal marshals stood stiffly against the walls. It wasn't an ordinary trial. This was something far bigger. This was about power, secrecy, and the people who dared to expose it. At the center of it all stood Kash Patel, former chief of staff to the Secretary of Defense and once a top investigator for the House Intelligence Committee. He wasn't just a witness. To many, he was a whistleblower. To others, a traitor. But to all, he was a man with answers that could rattle the highest offices in the land. The judge, stern, sharp, and known for taking no nonsense, looked at Patel from behind her elevated bench. Her voice echoed across the room. A hush fell. Kash didn't flinch. His legal team had already warned him. Refusing to answer could mean contempt charges, prison, fines, worse. But what Kash did next was something no one saw coming. From his briefcase, he pulled out a folder stamped declassified. He opened it slowly, deliberately, as if every second were part of a show. Then he pulled out a single page and held it up for everyone to see. It wasn't just a memo. It was the memo, and scrawled across the top, unmistakable, was the signature of the very judge now demanding answers. Gasps broke out. Even the stenographer stopped typing. What was this document? Why did it have her name? And how had Patel gotten hold of it? The judge's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Patel? Kash placed the memo flat on the table. I'm suggesting, Your Honor, that the information you're demanding I reveal was already known to you. In fact, you were part of the clearance process. Her face flushed red, not with embarrassment, but fury. The courtroom had erupted after Kash Patel lifted the veil of secrecy with one page, a declassified memo bearing the name of the presiding judge. But what no one realized in that heated moment was just how deep that single sheet of paper went. Back in his secure office days earlier, Patel had stared at the memo for hours. It wasn't labeled top secret anymore. It had been quietly declassified, possibly as part of a routine archive review. But its content? Explosive. The memo, dated over 2 years ago, documented an off-the-record intelligence briefing between a select group of federal officials. The subject? Media leaks about a covert operation involving surveillance on American citizens. Leaks that had mysteriously appeared in the press just days later. Names were redacted in most copies, but not this one. This version listed everyone in the room. Senior DOJ officials, intelligence leaders, a federal judge, yes, the very same one now presiding over Patel's testimony, and a name scrawled in the margins, KP, expected to resist. That was Kash himself. The note was a warning, a prediction that Patel would be a threat to the flow of information. Someone who wouldn't play along, someone to watch. No, Patel replied calmly. I'm accusing certain officials, some in this very room, of hiding behind secrecy to protect their own actions, and I'm here to reveal what they never thought would come to light. The document in question wasn't just proof of Patel's sources. It was a roadmap of connections, dates, and approvals. It contained names, meetings, and even signatures that linked government agencies to the very leaks Patel had been investigating for years. But how did Kash Patel get the memo? Who gave it to him? And why was it suddenly declassified, and now being waved like a sword in open court? That's when the courtroom lights seemed to dim. Metaphorically, at least. Because From that moment on, this wasn't just a legal case. It became a battle of reputations, of careers, of truth versus control. Outside the courthouse, protesters chanted. Media vans lined the streets, and theories began flying across social media. Some claimed it was all staged. Others said it was the beginning of a massive cover-up unraveling, in real time. But one thing was certain. The name on that memo changed everything. Are you accusing this court of misconduct? The memo went further, laying out a back-channel protocol to manage dissenting voices in the intel community. Whistleblowers, investigators, even members of Congress. The paper trail, dry and bureaucratic as it seemed, was a silent confession. And the judge's initials were there, not once, but multiple times. Her role, Patel believed, was never supposed to be public. So how had this document ended up in Patel's hands? That part remains unclear. Some sources whisper it came from a former intelligence officer turned whistleblower. Others say it was handed over in a sealed envelope, anonymously, during Patel's own investigation into FISA court abuses. What matters is that Patel verified it. The metadata, the stamp, the approval chain, all legitimate. The memo was real. And now, the court had seen it. Back in the courtroom, Patel's legal team demanded that the judge recuse herself. Conflict of interest, they argued. Bias. A judge who appears in a document central to the case cannot possibly remain impartial. But she refused. Yet the damage had been done. News anchors went live outside the courthouse. The words declassified memo and judicial conflict lit up every screen. Pundits debated the memo's implications while social media exploded with theories. Some believed Patel was being set up. Others claimed he had dirt on half the DC establishment. One thing was undeniable. Patel had rattled the system. In the hours that followed, multiple attempts were made to discredit the memo. Former DOJ insiders claimed it was misinterpreted. A former staffer called it standard procedural guidance. But Kash knew better. He'd seen this play before. Leaks, denials, spin. Only this time, he had something they couldn't. Erase. The actual paper. Declassified, legal, and now public record. He didn't care about fame. He wasn't chasing headlines. He wanted the truth out. And he was prepared to go further, to bring more documents to light if needed. This wasn't just about sources anymore. It was about the system itself, the shadow networks within government that operate behind closed doors. And for Kash Patel, it was only the B. The memo wasn't just a sheet of paper. It was a map, a timeline, a warning. Each meeting listed in it connected to another breadcrumb that Kash Patel had been quietly following for over a year. It began with a briefing in a windowless conference room inside a secure wing of the DOJ building. No media, no notes, just 5 people, all of them senior level. The memo called it a strategic alignment session, but what they discussed was anything but routine. They spoke of recent leaks about unauthorized surveillance. Not just international, domestic, surveillance that hadn't gone through full legal authorization. Intelligence reports had started appearing in select media outlets, stories that exposed just enough to cause panic, but not enough to point fingers. Every time a story dropped, Patel had noticed a pattern. The language used, the timing, the sources, they all seemed to circle back to the same small group of officials, and those same officials kept showing up in these secret meetings. The judge, according to the memo, was briefed under the justification of judicial oversight. But there was no record of formal clearance. That made her presence troubling. Her initials were on a follow-up note authorizing a silence order for anyone aware of the briefing. Silence orders were rare and usually reserved for national security emergencies. But this wasn't about foreign threats. It was about internal exposure. One section of the memo mentioned limited press influence operations. Patel had underlined that phrase 3 times when he first read it. It suggested deliberate feeding of select narratives to compliant journalists, all to manage public perception of the surveillance controversy. The memo even included code names: Cinder, Spectre, Hawk Watch, each one tied to a different operation, and one of them had been flagged months ago by a low-level analyst. That analyst had disappeared from the system days later, transferred, Patel suspected, under pressure. Kash had spent months trying to connect the names, dates, and memos. Every door he knocked on gave him part of the puzzle. But this document, this memo, finally tied them together. And it was all happening before the American public had any clue. Back in the courtroom, the judge denied another motion to halt proceedings. She dismissed the relevance of the memo again, calling it a mischaracterized internal communication, but Patel's team wasn't done. They introduced a second document, a calendar entry from one of the memo's listed attendees. It confirmed the meeting, the time matched, the room matched. And most importantly, the calendar had a red star next to it, a marker that, according to that agency's staff manual, meant restricted access. This wasn't a casual chat. It was a coordinated decision-making moment. Outside the courthouse, the leaks began again, only this time they were targeting Kash. Old texts, edited audio clips, rumors from Anonymous S